This podcast is titled Your Audience Will Find You. And that is for all of my creatives that you are frustrated. You've been doing whatever God has called you to do, whatever blessings that you have, and it seems like your audience doesn't know who you are. It's hard. You've been spending money on advertising and everything, and it just seems as though no one will find you, reach you, or they can't see you. And I want to give you encouragement from my own life. I've been, next year will be 10 years that I've done videos. A little bit before that, like I've done like blogs and everything, but as far as doing videos and showing up on videos, it has been about 10 years. And next year. But for the most part, I have been giving out encouragement probably since 2010. And the thing is, it wasn't overnight. By the grace of God, as far as like with the podcast, I have been able to reach other countries and everything like that. But once again, that wasn't overnight. And it's also about putting yourself out there. For the most part, when I first started doing podcasts and everything, I barely had any listeners. Even when I started doing videos, I barely had any listeners. But on top of that as well, I was like my audience was never in my state. It was never in my local area. My audience was always like in California or in other places, and I'm based out of New York. So the thing is, that's another thing as well, because you're like, well, some of you guys may be like, well, my family or my hometown, they don't support me. It's even in the Bible that your hometown may not support you. If you remember back in the Bible, and I'm super paraphrasing, but when Jesus tried to do miracles in Bethlehem, it didn't work out because all everyone saw him as was Joseph's son. They never saw him as the Messiah or anything like that. They only saw him as a carpenter's son. And so he wasn't able to basically perform miracles in his hometown. And that may be the same problem that you might have. You may not be able to give your blessings or, your encouragement, whatever you may do, your your hometown may not support you as well as you would like them to. And don't be afraid or don't get upset by it, because at the end of the day, that's not where you're meant to be. A lot of times, that is just your foundation. That's where God wants you to have you planted for a moment. But that's not your basically your stumping ground. That's not where you're going to end up. He may have you settled there for a moment just for you to get, your bearings, figure out what works, what doesn't work. But for the most part, he's going to give you somewhere else. So don't be upset or discouraged if your hometown, your family, and all those things, they don't support you. Because a lot of times our family isn't our audience. Our family isn't our customer. Our family isn't our consumer. So for the most part, don't get discouraged if they're not supporting you. There's a whole bunch of strangers that are supporting you. Like you listening to this podcast. I have probably never met you and all those things, but you have been a listener to this podcast and all those things. But at the end of the day, I'm not trying to, throw shade, but a lot of people in my hometown doesn't even know I do podcasts, or they know but they don't support and things like that. So at the end of the day, you can't get caught up on that, because what it will do is it will block you from the blessings that God has for you. So just realize and know that your audience will find you, and don't get discouraged. You got this.